Good evening, everyone. So we're going to begin in Judges 19 tonight, and my goal is to get to the end of the book of Judges if we can. It'll be a little tight, but I'm trying to get there, and then we'll have just the book of Ruth to do on Sunday morning. This section that's about to come up is very disturbing and very graphic. It's, as far as I know, it's the first recorded rape in the Bible, and what follows that is just very gruesome. So this is perhaps the most revealing example of just how depraved the Israelites had gotten without God. The clearest indication that we have about the time frame of when this story occurs is the mention of Phinehas as high priest. Phinehas was the son of Eleazar, who was the son of Aaron. And as far as I can tell, that's direct son and grandson. So Phinehas became high priest before Joshua died, and so he was a grown man before the conquest in Numbers 25. Therefore, by any reckoning, this story definitely took place fairly early in the time of the Judges. So let's begin the reading in Judges chapter 19. Now it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote part of the hill country of Ephraim, who took a concubine for himself from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him, and she went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah, and was there for a period of 4 months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak tenderly to her in order to bring her back, taking with him his servant and a pair of donkeys. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the girl's father saw him, he was glad to meet him. And his father-in-law, the girl's father, detained him, and he remained with him 3 days. So they ate and drank and lodged there. Now it came about on the 4th day that they got up early in the morning, and he prepared to go. And the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Sustain yourself with a piece of bread, and afterward you may go." So both of them sat down and ate and drank together. And the girl's father said to the man, "Please be willing to spend the night, and let your heart be merry." Then the man arose to go, but his father-in-law urged him, so that he spent the night there again. And on the 5th day he arose to go early in the morning, and the girl's father said, "Please sustain yourself and wait until afternoon." So both of them ate. When the man arose to go along with his concubine and servant, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, "Behold now, the day has drawn to a close. Please spend the night. Lo, the day is coming to an end. Spend the night here, that your heart may be merry. Then tomorrow you may arise early for your journey, so that you may go home." But the man was not willing to spend the night, so he arose and departed, and came to a place opposite Jebus, that is, Jerusalem. And there were with him a pair of saddled donkeys. His concubine also was with him. I'll just pause there briefly. This sounds very familiar. It sounds, I seemed like that was kind of the process that, was it Laban that kept doing that with his son-in-law in order to keep his daughter there day after day. Stay till lunch, and then just keep putting it off day after day. So I don't know, that might have been a tradition in those days to do that kind of thing. I don't know, to make the person feel welcome, or they genuinely, legitimately wanted them to stay. And you can kind of see that with their blood, their daughter leaving home and so forth. They're trying to put that off perhaps as long as possible. No big point there, just kind of an observation about perhaps the customs of the time. Verse 11, when they were near Jebus, the day was almost gone, and the servant said to his master, "Please come and let us turn aside into this city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it." However, his master said to him, We will not turn aside into the city of foreigners who are not of the sons of Israel, but we will go on as far as Gibeah. And he said to his servant, Come and let us approach one of these places, and we will spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah. So they passed along and went their way, and the sun set on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. And they turned aside there in order to enter and lodge in Gibeah. When they entered, they sat down in the open square of the city, for no one took them into his house to spend the night. Then behold, an old man was coming out of the field from his work at evening. Now the man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was staying in Gibeah, but the men of the place were Benjamites. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city, and the old man said, Where are you going? And where do you come from? And he said to him, We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote part of the hill country of Ephraim, for I am from there, and I went to Bethlehem in Judah. But I am now going to my house, and no man will take me into his house. Yet there is both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and also bread and wine for me, your maidservant, and the young man who is with your servants. There is no lack of anything. And the old man said, Peace to you, only let me take care of all your needs. However, do not spend the night in the open square. So he took him into his house and gave the donkeys fodder, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. And we see here another situation that I'm sure we're familiar with from other studies and so forth, that they didn't just go into a city and necessarily just find a hotel that they could stay in. They were at the mercy of people's hospitality. And I guess it was the custom of the day that was pretty was probably something that was pretty prevalent to happen, that you could go into a city. Especially his assumption here was that if he went into an Israelite city, they'd be better off in some way. Either they felt that they would have a better chance of finding a place to stay, or they perhaps thought it might have been safer to go into a city of the Israelites rather than the city of some enemy, some heathen nation like were occupying Jerusalem or Jebus at that time. But we're going to find in the next section that doesn't turn out to be the case at all as to where they were staying and the safety of it. And we could just see in those last few verses that this old man is basically warning them that it's not safe to stay in the square for the night. And so he wants to take them and take care of them, for their own safety. So any comments or anything up to that point in this chapter? I know we've done a lot of reading so far.
Well, I mean that should have been the expectation based on the Mosaic law. So
yeah,
they weren't unreasonable in thinking.
Right? Oh no! But the thing, obviously, what we're getting ready to see is just how depraved the nation has gotten, and so this is a very terrible narrative that we're about to see right here, starting with verse 22. And there's similarities here between what we see in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and with the depravity that's come to this city. Verse 22, While they were making merry, behold, the men of the city, certain worthless fellows, surrounded the house, pounding the door, and they spoke to the owner of the house, the old man, saying, Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may have relations with him. Then the man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said to them, No, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not commit this act of folly. Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. Please let me bring them out, that you may ravish them and do to them whatever you wish, but do not commit such an act of folly against this man. What do you make of this situation? I mean, any comments about what's going on here? And I don't know of any particular customs or whatever, but this, again, is very similar to the situation of Lot going into Sodom and Gomorrah, and the situation of the people, the men coming to the door and wanting the men, the angels that were with him and so forth to come out. And then they, instead of allowing them to have the men, they offer these women as bargaining chips or whatever. Any comments? I know that's a super broad question, but any comments or thoughts about why they would be doing this?
Well, I just think it speaks to to everyone's guilt in this. There's nobody that's innocent in this scene. Nobody. Everybody's at some level of fault. It's just varying degrees of fault, I guess you could say, or depravity. And I also don't think that, unfortunately, that while the story is shocking, I honestly don't feel that there are there's certainly areas of the world right now today where this could happen. And even in our society, in our country, I'm thinking third world, but even in our country, videos that I've seen of just the callousness of life, and I don't think that we're far from that either. I don't think this is shocking, but it's certainly conceivable, I guess I would say.
I mean, it's difficult for us to look at this and rationalize this in any way, and there's no reason for us to, because just because this is in the Bible, as Darren has made the point Sunday and has made the point in other cases very well, that just because something is written in the Bible does not mean that God is sanctioning it. There's so many bad things that are recorded in the Scriptures, even about the Bible heroes, showing that they're not righteous in and of their own goodness, and so, as we've seen all through the book of Judges, it's a life lesson of the depravity of where man will end up without God, and that's certainly what has happened here. Dan?
For Robert, I've always felt like that. The fact that the Bible presents everybody from Abraham to Moses on down the list, and then cases like this, and there's no effort to gloss it over. I see that as actually a powerful evidence of the integrity of Scripture. If this was purely a human product, the tendency is to do everything to hide the blemishes of the heroes and make them look greater than they are. And of course, it's easy in this case. This is not necessarily a heroic person by any stretch of the imagination, but the fact that even the people that we admire the most, they had their flaws, and the Scriptures are very open about that.
Yeah.
Robert, it really just stands out that this so closely mirrors the Sodom and Gomorrah story, but here instead of the Sodomites, it's God's people.
We could make the observation that I could say that it's either the fact that they were so opposed to homosexuality that they were willing to do the opposite and provide these women in order to stop that, or it could be that men were just valued more than women, which we know there's a lot of truth to that in these cultures as well. But it could also be the fact that these men have come under my roof, and therefore I can't allow anything to happen to them while they're under my supervision and in my care, which would in itself still put more value on the men than on the women. And that's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is in those cultures. We know in the New Testament that's not the case with Christ at all. He does not value men over women from the standpoint of value or worth by any stretch of the imagination. All right, verse 25. But the men would not listen to him. So the men seized his concubine and brought her out to them, and they raped her and abused her all night until morning, then let her go at the approach of dawn. As the day began to dawn, the woman came and fell down at the doorway of the man's house where her master was until full daylight. And to me, that sentence should say, and died, because you don't figure out that she actually died right there until a little bit later. When her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, then behold, his concubine was lying at the doorway of his house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, get up and let us go. But there was no answer. Then he placed her on the donkey, and the man arose and went to his home. When he entered his house, he took a knife and laid hold of his concubine and cut her in 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout the territory of Israel. And it came about that all who saw it said, nothing like this has ever happened or been seen from the day when the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak up. So again, there's probably no better example in the scriptures of just how bad things got in Israel when they turned their back on God and were not following God's laws and so forth, that they would become this depraved. Now, what's going on here in this particular circumstance? What seems to be the purpose of what this man has done with his concubine in cutting her up and sending her out to all the tribes?
Trying to unify them in some sort of crazy way, one piece per tribe, to get their attention and trying to rouse them.
Seems like a wake-up call to me. We don't have any indication here at all that God is behind this, that he's doing this in any prophetic way or anything like that, but nevertheless he seems to have some rage or some wisdom with his rage that causes him to use this as a teaching moment, as we might say. A very harsh one, obviously, but the woman's already dead. He had no direct part in that, other than allowing her to be put outside with these men. But now he's trying to use her as an object lesson, and it seems to have some benefit as we go forward with the story. The result of this, obviously, is a whole lot more turmoil, but at the end there seems to be, to some degree, a wake-up call by this happening. Anything else before we begin chapter 20? Then all the sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, came out, and the congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. And the chiefs of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, took their stand in the assembly of the people of God, 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Now the sons of Benjamin heard that the sons of Israel had gone up to Mizpah, and the sons of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this wickedness take place?" So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, "I came with my concubine to spend the night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. But the men of Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me. Instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died. And I took hold of my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout the land of Israel's inheritance, for they have committed a lewd and disgraceful act in Israel. Behold, all you sons of Israel, give your advice and counsel here." Then all the people arose as one man, saying, "Not one of us will go to his tent, nor will any of us return to his house. But now this thing is the thing which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it by lot." And we will take 10 men out of 100 throughout the tribes of Israel, and 100 out of 1,000, and 1,000 out of 10,000, to supply food for the people, that when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, they may punish them for all the disgraceful acts that they have committed in Israel. Thus all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, united as one man. Then the tribes of Israel sent men through the entire tribe of Benjamin, saying, What is this wickedness that has taken place among you? Now then, deliver up the men, the worthless fellows in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and remove this wickedness from Israel. But the sons of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the sons of Israel. That's just amazing. And the sons of Benjamin gathered from the cities to Gibeah to go out to battle against the sons of Israel. And from the cities on that day, the sons of Benjamin were numbered 26,000 men who drew the sword, besides the inhabitants of Gibeah, who were numbered 700 choice men. Out of all these people, 700 choice men were left-handed. Each one could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Then the men of Israel, besides Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 men who drew the sword. All of these were men of war. So up to this point, you take note that the size of the force of the group from Israel at large, is 400,000 versus a little over 26,000. So it's 15 times the size of the force that Benjamin has. Now, as I commented kind of in the middle there, it's just mind-boggling to me that in light of what has taken place in this city, within the territory, the nation, or whatever we want to call it, of Benjamin, that they're still willing to, it seems, that they're willing to defend these people, rather than turning them over for the obvious terrible things that they've done and save themselves all of this headache and bloodshed. They're willing to continue to hold these men, to harbor these men, and to even defend them with the sword up to this point. I mean, am I missing anything here? I mean, it seems to me that's exactly what's going on. They're saying, deliver these men, and they say, no, we're going to, and then they gather their forces and get ready for a battle.
Apparently they thought their clan loyalty outweighed any sense of justice here for what had happened.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting when you contrast this earlier in Judges, when they were at the verge of civil war with the Ephraimites, when they were indignant about, what they were indignant about is, oh, we had a mission you had a mission from God, and you left us out. When we want to pick a battle, there's no mission from God here. In this case,
yeah, and then the situation that we studied, where as the Ephraimites were crossing the ford of the Jordan, and they were making them say Sibboleth or Shibboleth, and they were killing them and so forth like that. I think I made the comment, I had it in my notes if I didn't skip over it for time or something, that at that time that, you know, this kind of was an illustration of the fact that over time these tribes have basically become different nations. So much so separate that they had obviously developed different dialects, to where this whole nation couldn't even pronounce this word, and they give themselves away so easily just by that. And so here we have the same kind of situation, this tribal, this national pride. It almost seems like they're not going to let anybody else, any of these other tribes, tell them what to do, especially Benjamin, the smallest, versus Israel, the biggest. And this could be, you know, this could be Judah, or it could be a number of the Israeli tribes, the Israel tribes they're talking about here. Dan?
I think it's an illustration and a lesson to show how blind we can become when we overcome with arrogance and pride, and we will, you know, defend ourselves. I mean, as obvious as this should have been, we would know how depraved Israel had become, but they weren't totally depraved, because all these people recognized this was an atrocity, and they're rising up. But here, these people in Benjamin, it's a case, you know, we can get so defensive in our position sometimes, whether it's a group position or it's just personal pride, that whatever the other person says, I'm going to say the opposite. Whatever position they take, I'm going to take the opposite. And we get blinded to the truth and to our guilt sometimes. And I'm sure there's more behind all this, but it seems to me this is an object. This is a lesson in human nature and how far we can go if we don't get past our pride and are willing to accept the fact that something wrong has done and we're guilty.
Verse 18. Now the sons of Israel arose, went up to Bethel, and inquired of God, and said, Who shall go up first for us to battle against the sons of Benjamin? Then the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. So the sons of Israel arose in the morning and camped against Gibeah. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel arrayed for battle against them at Gibeah. Then the sons of Benjamin came out of Gibeah and fell to the ground on that day, 22,000 men of Israel. Now, if this is the first time you'd ever read that, would that be a surprise to you? It was to me, even though I'd read it before. We kind of forget who wins this thing. And even though we saw and we've just discussed at some length who's mostly at fault here, at least in this particular instance about the concubine, we would think that Israel is on the right here and that they're going to be the ones that are going to be favored by God and going to have a victory, even, especially since God even tells them who to send out first, but yet he doesn't give them victory. So let's continue. Verse 22, But the people, the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and arrayed for battle again in the place where they had arrayed themselves the first day. And the sons of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until the evening, and inquired of the Lord, saying, Shall we again draw near for battle against the sons of my brother Benjamin? And the Lord said, Go up against them. Then the sons of Israel came against the sons of Benjamin the second day. And Benjamin went out against them from Gibeah the second day, and fell to the ground again 18,000 men of the sons of Israel. All these drew the sword. So what do you think we can infer from this up to this point, before we read the rest of the story in the next few verses, as to why God is not giving Israel the victories here, even in this situation where Benjamin seems to be the more at fault? And that's the clue, more at fault. They're both at fault. Obviously, Israel is not in the good graces of God either. They're not acting rightly in the bigger picture, I guess, with God, and they're probably still having their Baals, and they haven't returned to God in the way that he would be with them the way he has been in the past, or where he would fight their battles for them. There's still more to be done, and that's why we see a little bit more in the next few verses. Go ahead, Derek.
I'm reminded by that even even when it's not mentioned, I think there are casualties. So even when, often we get just the account that they went to battle and they wiped them out and they killed X number of the other people, right? But there isn't without cost still on Israel's side. I don't think any of those, except for maybe one or two cases where it appears that literally nobody died on Israel's side. I think we should assume and can infer that there is cost, because like with the Gideon, he says, to pare down, right? He says, if you got women and children at home, if you just got married, go home. And I think that's not because you need to take care of your wife just while we're going to be gone, but you may not come back. And so I feel like, we need to remember that there's still a cost. And when these people are saying, when God says, you're going to get the victory, it doesn't mean, oh, okay, great, let's just go and, have some fun and knock it out, and we'll come home tonight case, and right. Everything will be good. You might die, but you're going to win.
So in verse 26, continuing, Then all the sons of Israel and all the people went up and came to Bethel and wept. Thus they remained there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the sons of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, Aaron's son, stood before it to minister in those days, saying, Shall I yet again go out to battle against the sons of my brother Benjamin, or shall I cease? And the Lord said, Go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into your hand. So Israel set men in ambush around Gibeah. And the sons of Israel went up against the sons of Benjamin on the third day, and arrayed themselves against Gibeah as at other times. And the sons of Benjamin went out against the people, and were drawn away from the city, and they began to strike and kill some of the people as at other times on the highways, one of which goes up to Bethel, and the other to Gibeah, and in the field about 30 men of Israel. And the sons of Benjamin said, They are struck down before us, as at the first. But the sons of Israel said, Let us flee, that we may draw them away from the city to the highways. Then all the men of Israel arose from their place, and arrayed themselves at Baal Tamar, and the men of Israel in ambush broke out of their place, even out of Mearah Geba, when 10,000 choice men from all Israel came against Gibeah. The battle became fierce, but Benjamin did not know that disaster was close to them. And the Lord struck Benjamin before Israel, so that the sons of Israel destroyed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day, all who drew the sword. So almost all of the Benjamin group was killed in this single battle right here. There's only a very small group of them that ends up being left. Now this next section of verses here, verses 36 through 48, I believe is just a retelling of what just happened in more detail. Because it's the same story again. The first one just seems like a summary of how they concocted this ambush situation, and then these next verses kind of gives it a bit more, puts a little bit more detail behind it. And if you do the math at the end in verse 44 and 45, it all kind of works out to the same number of people that gets killed. Let me read that, and then we'll, if I'm missing something there, you guys can correct me on that. So the sons of Benjamin, verse 36, so the sons of Benjamin saw that they were defeated when the men of Israel gave ground to Benjamin, because they relied on the men in ambush whom they had set against Gibeah. The men in ambush hurried and rushed against Gibeah. The men in ambush also deployed and struck all the city with the edge of the sword. Now the appointed sign between the men of Israel and the men in ambush was that they should make a great cloud of smoke rise from the city. Then the men of Israel turned in the battle, and Benjamin began to strike and kill about 30 men of Israel, for they said, Surely they are defeated before us, as in the first battle. But when the cloud began to rise from the city in a column of smoke, Benjamin looked behind them, and behold, the whole city was going up in smoke to heaven. Then the men of Israel turned, and the men of Benjamin were terrified, for they saw that disaster was close to them. Therefore they turned their backs before the men of Israel toward the direction of the wilderness. But the battle overtook them, while those who came out of the cities destroyed them in the midst of them. They surrounded Benjamin, pursued them without rest, and trod them down opposite Gibeah toward the east. Thus 18,000 men of Benjamin fell. All of these were valiant warriors. The rest turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. But they caught 5,000 of them on the highways and overtook them at Gittim and killed 2,000 of them. So all of Benjamin who fell that day were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were valiant warriors. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness of the rock of Rimmon, and they remained at the rock of Rimmon 4 months. The men of Israel then turned back against the sons of Benjamin and struck them with the edge of the sword, both the entire city with the cattle and all that they found. They also set on fire all the cities which they found. So, so God, obviously the Lord finally supports Israel. He tells them beforehand the third time around what he's going to do here, and he allows them to win the battle this third time. And almost all of the tribe of Benjamin, it seems like here, is wiped out, because as we go forward in this next chapter and see this odd little story at the end on how they preserve the tribe of Benjamin. Now they all of a sudden, they're like, after we've done all this damage, they're all of a sudden like, we can't allow one of the tribes of the Lord to just vanish and go away. We've got to do something here. And so they have to figure out a way to get wives for these only 600 men of Benjamin who are left at the very end. So any comments right there before we finish up? We got this one little short chapter here to finish in the next 10 minutes, and we'll get to where we want to get to tonight. So apparently the things that the Israelites did there finally at the end of really and truly being contrite and offering the sacrifices and inquiring of the Lord through the priest and doing the things that they needed to do, perhaps was what finally appeased God to the point that he allowed Israel to be victorious in this final battle. Chapter 21, the last chapter in the book of Judges. Now the men of Israel had sworn in Mizpah, saying, none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin in marriage. So this almost, in hindsight, this almost looks like one of these rash vows that now they can't take back. But in hindsight, it doesn't seem like it was such a great idea. So they got to figure out a way around that. So the people came to Bethel and sat there before God until evening, and lifted up their voices and wept bitterly. And they said, why, O Lord, God of Israel, has this come about in Israel, so that one tribe should be missing today in Israel? And it came about the next day that the people arose early and built an altar there, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. Then the sons of Israel said, who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up in the assembly to the Lord? For they had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, he shall surely be put to death. Another vow. And the sons of Israel were sorry for their brother Benjamin, and said, one tribe is cut off from Israel today. What shall we do for wives for those who are left, since we have sworn by the Lord not to give them any of our daughters in marriage? So we're going to find out a little bit later down in this chapter, but we can surmise from this that in all of this carnage and them burning the city and everything in the last chapter, that all of the women were killed at that time. Verse 8, and they said, what one is there of the tribes of Israel who did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah? And behold, no one had come to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were numbered, behold, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. And the congregation sent 12,000 of the valiant warriors there, and commanded them, saying, go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, with the women and the little ones. And this is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every man and every woman who has lain with a man. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man by lying with him. And they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then the whole congregation sent word and spoke to the sons of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon, and proclaimed peace to them. And Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had kept alive from the women of Jabesh Gilead, yet they were not enough for them. And the people were sorry for Benjamin, because the Lord had made a breach in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, what shall we do for wives for those who are left, since the women are destroyed out of Benjamin? So there's the more direct statement that says what happened to the women of Benjamin. And they said, "There must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be blotted out of Israel. But we cannot give them wives of our daughters, for the sons of Israel had sworn, saying, 'Cursed is he who gives a wife to Benjamin.' So they said, 'Behold, there is a feast of the Lord from year to year in Shiloh, which is on the north side of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and on the south side of Lebanon.' And they commanded the sons of Benjamin, saying, 'Go and lie in wait in the vineyards, and watch. And behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to take part in the dances, then you shall come out of the vineyards, and each of you shall catch his wife from the daughters of Shiloh, and go to the land of Benjamin. And it shall come about, when their fathers or their brothers come to complain to us, that we shall say to them, Give them to us voluntarily, because we did not take for each man of Benjamin a wife in battle, nor did you give them to them, else you would now be guilty.' And the sons of Benjamin did so, and took wives according to their number from those who danced, whom they carried away, and they went and returned to their inheritance, and rebuilt the cities and lived in them. And the sons of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family, and each one of them went out from there to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." So it seems to me that they basically found a loophole in the vow that they had made about not giving any daughters to these Benjamites by coming up with this scheme of where they're going to go out there and they're going to just go kidnap some. You didn't give it to me because I took them, even though it was their scheme that came up with this whole thing. Anything more about that you make of it beyond what I'm saying there? That's all I see from this. They make this vow. In the hindsight, it kind of becomes a rash vow and has ramifications that they're not willing to accept, which is the blotting out of the tribe of Benjamin. And then they got to come up with some way of repopulating the tribe of Benjamin by allowing them to have wives without breaking their vow.
Well, the only part that they inquired of God was when they were going out to battle. Previously, they weren't inquiring of God, okay, God, we need a solution to this. Direct us. So again, they had reverted back to their own, I don't even want to call it wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was as harebrained as you can get, pretty much. So, again, they took God out of the equation, pretty much.
Seems like it.
And, whoever cooked this up, I mean, it's pretty bizarre. When you talk about the depravity, you're reminded of, like in 1 Corinthians, when Paul calls out the man that was sleeping with his stepmother, and talking about other instances where the people in the church were committing atrocities even the Gentiles wouldn't name. And I'm sure the people of the lands that were watching all this going on were going, these are the people of God?
Yeah, it's going back to some of the thematic things we talked about at the very beginning of the class. The big lesson that we get out of the book of Judges is just the hard-headedness, the short-sightedness of man, the short memory that men have about what God does for them and what happens to them when they turn away from God, and we see this just over and over and over.
I don't suppose there's any particular significance to this observation, but it is interesting to me that it turns out that the first anointed king of Israel turns out to be one of the descendants of these Benjamites, Saul of Benjamin. I'll just leave it at that.
You were right.
That's all I got to say about that.
That's right.
But it is interesting when we look at it in the light of the fact that they were almost extinct.
Well, to me, it is a very powerful irony in the story. But you know, I wouldn't dare go beyond that and suggest that God intended it that way to teach us something. Maybe there is something there, but I'll leave that to each person to figure it out.
Yeah, and it would take us a bit more research, of course, to dig in and find out the timelines and so forth. But it's not very many years hence that Saul is anointed king, as you said, it comes from Benjamin. So where did he come from? Was he a survivor of some sort of these battles and therefore?
Well, I mean, of course,
remains?
Like you said, you know, it's difficult to know the precise timeline or even how long the period of the judges lasted. And you know, I think I would just have to assume that. I mean, this is not where I was going with it. I'm just assuming that Saul, you know, was born from one of these families that had managed, you know, to survive and put their families back together, as described here in the last chapter of Judges.
Almost has to be.
Yeah.
Because the life of Samuel and the life of Saul overlap, you know, by some years, and Saul had to be at least a young adult in order to be anointed king and do the things that he ended up doing. So, yeah. All right. Thank you. Yeah, let's put up with me in just a couple of minutes again up here.
In that case, I guess we can go ahead and get started.
Crank it up.
If you are able to, let's go ahead and mark number 298. I'm not ashamed to own my Lord. 298. We will sing that after the invitation tonight. But before the invitation, we'll sing number 870. 870. I'm happy today. I'm happy today, yes, I'm happy today, in Jesus Christ. I'm happy today, because He's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm happy today. I'm singing today, oh yes, I'm singing today, in Jesus Christ. I'm singing today, because He's taken all my sins away.
away, and that's why I'm singing today. I'm praying today, oh yes, I'm praying today. In Jesus Christ I'm praying today, because He's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm praying today. I'm happy today, oh yes, I'm singing today. In Jesus Christ I'm praying today, because He's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm sharing today.
The last time I was up here doing an invitation, I spent entirely too long, and I apologize for that. I miscalculated how much material I had, and when I went back and looked and I was 20 minutes, I was like, oh my goodness, that's way too long for a Wednesday night talk. So it will not be that long tonight. That's it. 2 pages. Over the last few invitations, I have talked about how men have repainted God to be someone totally different than the picture of Him that we see in Scriptures. We see God being criticized for not doing enough or not doing things our way. And I talked about the fact that we're not equal in position with God, so we're not able to question His motives and means. And in order to better see why we are so far beneath Him, I started looking at His attributes. And the last time I talked about God's holiness. When we describe God as being purely or entirely holy, and so by nature He cannot have any association with things that are unholy, it may leave us still wondering why there must be punishment involved for not attaining to the level of holiness that He demands. And that's where God's justice comes into play. So that's another attribute of God that I want to talk about tonight. When we use the term justice, we can mean different things in different situations. When applied to human circumstances, we demand justice for someone who commits a horrific crime, such as rape, murder, or child abuse. What we really mean is that we want them to be punished, to pay a price. We might look at a judge in a court, and sometimes a judge, a human judge, gives a severe sentence to one person and a lighter sentence to another for essentially the same crime, based on the circumstances of each one. And we say, justice was served. A true definition of justice, though, is to make right, which implies that something is first not right. When someone commits a crime, someone else has been wronged. For justice to be served, the wrong must be made right. And sometimes that may be in the form of a fine or a repayment of something that was stolen, or compensation for some violent crime. And sometimes it can even be paying that debt with our own lives. The Old Testament law of an eye for an eye is not meant to apply to personal revenge, but applies to governments. It means that the punishment for a crime should be appropriate to the crime committed, no more and no less. So justice can only be just if it is applied equally to everyone, whether rich or poor. However, even in the best of human courts, sometimes justice will not be perfect. Humans are imperfect, so their ability to mete out perfect justice is also imperfect. A human judge does not have the ability to know everything about the person's motives. his underlying character, or perhaps some extenuating circumstances that led him to commit a crime. So the judge cannot provide perfect justice. But the same cannot be said about God's justice. God does have the ability to provide perfect justice because He has all the facts. He knows all the whys that led the person to commit the crime. He has perfect understanding of the law because He created the law. He knows the person's heart, and He knows the person's future. But that makes us ask, why is God's law so demanding? And why does He demand justice when we break His law? So let's explore these questions to try to come to a better understanding of God and His justice. Earlier, I explored God's nature by looking at His perfect holiness. So when we look at God's attribute of justice, we must see it through the lens of His holiness in order to see it properly. Let's use the example of a parent-child relationship to try to illustrate the concept of justice. In a family that's made up of parents and children, most everyone agrees that the parents not only have the right to make rules for their children, but they have a responsibility to do so. When a child breaks rules, usually there are consequences. This is justice. But even in the best of families, with the best of parents, there are often inconsistencies in the application of justice when rules are broken. Many times, parents will say, if you break this rule, this will be your punishment. But when the child breaks the rules, the parent sometimes overlooks it and does not apply the punishment. This inconsistency may be looked at by our human minds as mercy, patience, long-suffering, and it's possible that sometimes these positive characteristics are involved. But in the end, it is still an imperfect and inconsistent application of justice. When justice is applied inconsistently over and over, the child soon becomes confused and has no idea where the boundaries really are, because what they're told and what they see are completely different. But that's not true with God's justice. God doesn't move the goalposts on us, leaving us confused about where the boundaries are. He made it clear in His Word what He allows and what He forbids. He has also made it clear what the punishments are, and He will distribute the rewards and punishments evenly and fairly to all men, without respect to their social status, race, or other outward appearance. So what is that punishment? Romans 6:23 says, "For the wages of sin is death." We know that the word wages means something that we earn. So this death, this spiritual death, is what we earn. We deserve it when we sin. Why do we deserve it? Because we broke the rules of the owner of the universe. Perhaps to our human brains that sounds harsh. Don't forget about God's holiness that makes it impossible for Him to have any association with sin. He must do it this way because He is entirely holy. If He did anything less than meting out perfect justice, He would not be perfectly holy. So as I stated above, God's justice and holiness are inextricably connected. It's not a matter of whether He chooses to be strict with His rules. It is because of who and what He is that requires Him to provide perfect justice. But even by better understanding God's holiness and justice, we still have an incomplete picture of who God is. So the next question that someone may have is, what gives God the right to make the rules in the first place? If he didn't make the rules as they are, then there would be no need to exact justice when they are broken. I'll explore this the next time I speak, when I'll explore another attribute of God and his rights. So that's what I had to say tonight. I'm fairly certain that in our audience tonight we don't have anyone that needs an invitation to be baptized into Christ. But if there's any other need that anyone has that wishes that they need to make known or have the prayers of the congregation, you have this opportunity now while we stand and sing the song that's been chosen.
I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, or to defend his cause. Maintain the honor of his word, the glory of his cross. Jesus, my God, I know his name. His name is all my trust. Nor will he put my soul to shame, nor let my hope be lost. Firm as his throne, his promise stands, and he can well secure what I've committed to his hands till the decisive hour. Then will he own my worthless name before his Father's face, and in the new Jerusalem appoint for me a place.
Good evening. It's good to be here tonight with everyone. Let's continue to keep the members here who are traveling and are in sickness in our prayers. Are there any announcements to be made tonight? If not, we'll be led in a close prayer.
Let's go to our God in prayer. Our Holy Father, we come before you thankful for the many blessings you bestow upon us. We're so thankful that we've had this beautiful day to enjoy and to use to do good and to glorify your holy name. We're thankful that we've had this opportunity here this evening to come together as this church family to engage in these few moments of meditation and study of your holy word. Help us to use the things that we have considered tonight. May it refresh our mind concerning the great lessons that you have provided for us in your word, the stories and the people who have gone before. Help us to learn both from the mistakes of the past and the victories. And we pray that as we go forward, that we will use the things that we have learned from your word and things that give us hope and things wherein we stand, and use them to sustain us, to carry us forward as we serve you and do your work. We're mindful, Father, of various ones of our family here who are in need of your care and your help, and we pray especially for our dear Maureen as she continues her treatments later this week. Continue to bless her and strengthen her through this ordeal, and if it be your will, heal her of this illness. Be with Ralph as he helps and supports her. We're so thankful for them. We're also mindful of those who are traveling away from us, and we pray that they will be brought safely home and be with us again as soon as possible. Be with us now as we go from this place and keep us safe. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.